This is BBC One in colour.
And now, part one of this week's Z-Car story, which is in black and white.
Hello and welcome back to Round the Archives in Conversation. Today we have Martin. Hello Martin.
Hello there, how you doing?
We have Paul. Hello Paul.
Hello, hello.
And we have Nick. Hello Nick.
Hello.
Welcome back Nick. Nice to have you again. Now, today I thought we'd talk about formats.
Oh.
And there are lots of formats because I realised that we've started doing 625 line, 525 line jokes whenever we get Toppy Smelly on around the archives. But I just wonder how many people even know what we're talking about these days. Because I don't know if you remember, Martin, in about 1984, Celestial Toy Room published a list of John Pertwee stories and what format they existed in.
Oh, yes.
And it was a right old mixed bag, wasn't it?
Well, it still is in many ways, isn't it?
Yes, it's better now.
Yes.
But, we're talking black and white, colour, American, off-air recordings.
Am I going to get my
tapes.
NSTCs and my NTSCs mixed up at the moment?
I don't know.
I always get that one the wrong way around. The only reason I ever learned about that was that a friend of mine had a Panasonic television. And it had a switch on it that adjusted, and he told me all about this, and I'm going, oh what? So I was very dim in those days, but there we go.
but Martin, you were there for the Pertwee era.
Yes,
you were. But are your earliest memories of Pertwee in colour or in black and white?
Well, I would have seen them on broadcast. Now, the interesting thing from that point of view to me is that I can very vividly remember the first time we got a colour television set, because it was in the summer holidays and we got it from DER because we used to rent our telly back then, and it arrived in the middle of a morning and had to be set up by the man from the DER company, and the very first programme I saw in colour on a colour television screen was Thunderbirds. Ooh. So I would have been around, I would reckon, around about 1972, 1973. So whilst my earliest memory of Pertwee on TV, I think, is the opening episode of Colony in Space. It's the thing I can remember. I can remember that scene when they go into the TARDIS in that episode. I can't guarantee I saw it in colour.
Mm-hmm. But Nick, you were somewhat later coming to colour, weren't you?
I was.
Was
yes.
it Tom Baker before you saw Doctor Who in colour?
It was definitely Tom Baker. Yes, my parents, as this will, I've probably mentioned this on more than one occasion, due to formats and things like that, and progressions in technology. They were always a little bit financially conservative, shall we say, although not politically. And any new thing, either my dad really got it, or was no, we don't want that. When we moved to Harlem in 1978, it was announced that we were finally getting a colour telly, and I was like, whoa, yeah, this isn't like my parents at all, yeah. And the first Doctor Who I saw in colour was part 1 of Stones of Blood. Even now I can't watch part 1 of Stones of Blood without looking around for the tea chests and the complete chaos that we were in. But yes, the telly, I think did Martin mention DER then? Mm-hmm. By any chance?
Yes, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. We too had DER, and it was very. It was a bit touch and go. You know, they had a lot of faults in those days. The rolling screen, the fuzz, and it was a very bad time for. There was lots of strikes as well, so the telly was always going wrong in those days. So we had the colour was a bit. So when the ogre kind of glow with the blood in Stones of Blood, it was very kind of very bleedy and very kind of unsubtle colour. And sure enough, you know that it was the telly by power of Kroll. The telly had become hopelessly garbled. that I have a memory of this part to a Power of Kroll being a $6 million man crossover. But 78 was when we finally hit. We went to 625 line in 75.
The cathode ray tube, isn't it? Yeah.
Indeed, yeah. We had an Echo set, which was your bulk standard portable throughout the 60s, and until my mum went back to work in 75, and we could actually afford a nice big telly, but still not colour. So I was 625 line, and we actually got BBC Two for the first time in 75 as well. So I didn't notice, being a kid, I didn't notice the difference between.
No, so I'd say there were a lot of very, very rubbish British tellies back then, weren't there? That's the other thing. That was, that had terrible cathode ray tubes. The knob on ours, I know for some reason, had the only way a connection could be made on one of the dials was because there was a bit of tin foil inside it, which made the connection. But why we didn't burn the house down, I don't know.
But Paul, I'm guessing, Paul, that did you have black and white? Do you have memories of a black and white telly, or were you colour all the way?
Well, I think we were colour all the way. I don't know when my parents last had a black and white set, but the funny thing was, I don't. This is not Doctor Who, but Star Trek. I'm not quite sure how many times it was repeated in the 80s, but I used to go and stay with my great aunt in Reading, and she still had a black and white TV, and I'm pretty much sure that they were showing Star Trek, and I watched an episode at her house in black and white, having already remembered seeing it in colour back at home a few years before, and finding it, actually, Star Trek in black and white is, because it was a spooky one down in the caves, I thought, actually, this is quite a lot scarier than I remember it being in black and white.
No, I really like black and white. I really like black and white films. I'm not a fan of colorization at all, but the funny thing for me is that I had a black and white portable in my bedroom, and when I went to college I took that away with me, and so I actually watched in black and white all the way up to 1986. So all the new Who in between sort of 82 and 86 when I was at college, I saw in black and white, which actually means that the Colin Baker era looks a heck of a lot better in my memory.
He didn't have a garish costume.
I'm amazed, actually. I'd sometimes find that even now, if you take Twin Dilemma and switch it to black and white, it looks a heck of a lot better.
But Nick, I'm guessing then that the first time you would have seen sort of early Tom Baker in colour, would that be at local group meetings? Would it be that late?
Oh, what, the pre-Stones? Yes, absolutely. I think Pyramids of Mars was the first pre-Stones Baker story I would have seen in colour. Oh no, actually, strictly speaking, and this is a really pedantic point, Pirate Planet from the repeat showing the summer before. But yes, Pyramids of Mars. I didn't have a video recorder until '88, and we went to Fiona. Keith and I went to Fiona Matheson's house, and we went round Shatwick, and she got back, and she showed us Pyramids from the VHS release. And I would have seen Pyramids twice before in black and white, but that was my first colour, and swiftly followed by Braden Morbius, and of course all the local group recordings that we saw.
But then, of course, we've talked about sort of pirate video before, and Paul, you said that you got a lot of recordings from Australia and places like that, and Australia is actually on the same system as us, of course, 625 lines, whereas American recordings, even things sort of done on video, you can tell the difference. That's the thing. But you said in your Twilight Zone article that there are a couple of Twilight Zone episodes that look different.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, they're done on, I think there's more, there's like 6 or something like that.
There's a few that were done on video, weren't there?
That's right, yeah.
It's like that second year of Ghost Squad. It's the same thing. It just suddenly looks awful.
Because I remember seeing things like Rowan and Martin's laughing.
The smear. The smear
and
of
wondering why it looked fuzzy.
Yeah. Do you remember Astronaut? Do you remember
I
Astronaut?
know
the
the
cartoon?
name. I
The
know
cartoon,
the name.
the
I
little
couldn't tell
alien.
you. I couldn't tell you the plot really. But
It was the fact that they always referred to him as green, and he was blue on all our British tellies. And I think that was something to do with the conversion as well.
Yeah.
But you've also got the difference between Doctor Who, which is done, or at least in the 70s, was done on multi-camera VT a lot, and film series like Star Trek. As a kid, did you sort of distinguish between these two sort of ways of doing it?
Well, I miss the Baird system. Obviously, it's. I feel that 24 lines was the way to go. Quite frankly, I felt that everything after that was a waste of time. It'll never catch on. I used to say, it's like this sound in films. No one will want to hear that in 10 years.
But for example, Spearhead from Space feels very different to the rest of season 7. And I think that's only shown up more and more as it's gone from VHS releases to DVD to Blu-ray as well.
But that's the interesting thing about 16mm film. I think it was Sweeney shot on 16mm as well. When you look at the ITC stuff from the 60s, which was on 35mm film. So to save money, suddenly Jason King comes along, and that's 16mm, and it looks smeary as hell in comparison. But there's something cinema verity about the 16mm stuff that they did on the Sweeney, because it was all in that, and you don't notice it, and it really looks like documentary stuff. But the one and only Doctor Who that's solidly on film from the classic era actually just looks brilliant now. You know.
I remember when they repeated it, whenever that was now. I was watching it with my flatmate, who wasn't a Doctor Who fan, but he watched all the Spearhead, and then when it went, I think they did show Silurians as well. When it went to Silurians, he was like, don't like it like this anymore. So yeah, I wonder what it would have been if everything had been like that.
But Nick and Paul, of course, have done a lot of filming of your own, and I would guess it was cost that pushed you towards VHS-C. But have you ever experimented with a film camera? Anybody at all?
I've not, no.
With me, with the recordings, I think VHS, I took my cue very much from what was available at the time, but I did think there was... I wasn't overly keen on Video 8, which was supposed to be the better format. Looking at some of Andy's stuff and some of the stuff we were doing at the time, I actually preferred VHS-C. But I did go later. I did do a couple of films on VH. I think the last 3 I did were on Video 8. But I think that got better. But I did actually prefer VHS-C.
But Martin, have you ever played with film?
Well, not as much as I ought to. The thing is that when I was a student, an art student, we did a term that was all in the video, television, film building, and one of the things we had to do was to make an animation, and we used clockwork Bolex cameras. I don't know if you know about Bolex cameras, but you wind them up. You literally wind them up, and you shoot your frames individually to do animation, and they're beautiful things, gorgeous objects. You know what I mean? And they're all just clockwork. There's no batteries or anything like that, and they'll take 1 frame, they'll take 2 frames. But that is probably the only film camera I've ever actually handled.
But Nick, you're now backing up all of your recordings and Paul's recordings. Can you just explain how you do that and what equipment you use to achieve that?
Right. I've actually changed equipment in the last year, but for years I've been using a machine, literally just a machine like a VHS-C or a DVD player, which has got the 2 sides. It's got the video and the DVD recorder. So I've got the converter tape, which you probably remember me using in the old days, and I get like a Sutton Park, and I put it in there, set it recording, and I used to record them on disc, and then rip that disc with ripping software onto my computer as a video file. These days, because that machine unfortunately broke down, and I've been using a sort of more leads that goes directly into the laptop as it is now, from a normal video recorder. and getting the signal straight off there. So I have changed my way in a different way. I've asked Paul to keep an eye on the pitch quality and tell me if there's anything wrong, or sort of there's a drop in quality, but it's a bit simpler now to do. But yeah, I've been scouring everything VHS and getting it digitalized. So there's all the old recordings we've got now. Obviously when lockdown is eased, I can go and get the stragglers of Sutton Park and finish it off, and all the other things that we're. But no, I'm very keen. It's one of my favourite hobbies at the moment, I must admit. Getting everything upgraded and available for everyone.
But you said about picture quality. I mean, these tapes are 20 years, getting on 30 years in some cases old, which is a frightening thought. Do you find they still want to play ball?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I mean, I think, of course, I've been working.
I was saying, well, you're the one who puts them in motion more than I do. But you've worked tricks around it, haven't you, when you've had problems?
I think with Sutton Park, I'm looking to get the material off and safe and labelled and filed. Whereas with the films, because with the exception of Decry the Woman, we've done them all on DVD now. And Andy gave me a few tips about improving the picture quality, and because it's video, it's quite bright. So the first thing we did was get it through, bring up the sound a bit, because that's the one thing I must admit. VHS Video 8 was better sound quality. Lowered the light down a bit, brought down the colour, and it actually we only did that slightly on the latter half really of the remastering, and it did improve the picture quality and made it a lot more watchable for the DVDs that we did.
But getting back to sort of DVD releases in general, I think it's no secret that the Doctor Who releases get sort of new techniques thrown at them in terms of like conversion from American copies and vidfire and things like that. How do you feel generally about the standards, and are there things that you wish they do or wish they don't do?
I'm certainly with the releases that they're doing for first of all for that, I can't really comment on the Blu-rays because I haven't actually got them yet, but I'm constantly delighted by the sort of things they're doing. I don't think really, apart from the only thing I'm not into are the CGI effects, because invariably they look naff in a few years. It was a bit of a waste of time. But in terms of actually improving the picture, yes, I think the restoration team have done a fabulous job over the years, and of course they keep going back and improving things, like the Enemy of the World thing. They got better, and then they they cleaned it up beautifully, and then they put out the special edition and they cleaned it up even more. And I think with vidfire as well, that with the old Hartnolds, I think that they've spruced up very nicely indeed, better than the original broadcaster, no doubt. And so I get quite excited about the rest, the improvements in quality and chroma dots, bringing back the colour. I will point out, after what Martin said, he's not a great fan of colorization. I'm with him on that totally, but I do think if it's nice to bring back the colour on something that was originally colour. Mind of Evil was it was a revelation, because they were able to get the chroma dots and restore the colour. Part 1 still looks a little bit, like it could do with sprucing up a little bit, but it's still beautiful to see it in colour at last.
Well, what about you, Martin? You buy quite a few DVDs.
Far more than I should with my lack of income. Yes. It's interesting, I suppose. Like you say, I mean, when something was made in colour, that's fine. I do have slight problems with colorized versions of old black and white. I know it's a way of getting a new audience, and I understand it, but I don't particularly feel that Hartnell and Troughton need to be colorized. That's not how they were made. But again, that's not necessarily the modern point of view, and I accept that I'm an old fuddy-duddy who has different opinions on things.
No, I'm a fuddy-duddy too. I'll back you up on that.
My problem sometimes is that some of the stuff I buy, I think. I mean. I know we watched Sergeant Cork, and there's a few of those that are very ratty indeed. But the fact that you can watch them at all is such an advantage. And I think the beauty of certainly over the last few years, the stuff that's coming out on DVD that you thought you'd never see again, is truly astonishing. And to be honest, to see something at all sometimes is better than nothing. But I mean, there's things like Public Eye. I mean, some of the black and white stuff, it could do with cleaning up, but there isn't the budget, and I'd rather it was released at all. I mean, but you get sort of like roll out, drop out, and fuzzy moments. But actually, you can still watch the episode and you can still understand it. I'm not a huge fan, really, of the way they advertise new formats and sort of dismiss the old format, because I actually think in most cases the DVD quality is good enough. I don't have a 100-inch screen, and I don't really think, in many ways, I can't tell just by the naked eye the difference in many ways between the Blu-ray and the DVD release of anything. I've got things like some of the ITC stuff I've got on DVD. Now people tell me, oh yeah, the Blu-ray looks brilliant, fantastic, you can read all the details in all the signs in the background and everything like that, but to me it doesn't change the script, it doesn't change the performance, so it doesn't really matter as much to me to go and buy something again when there's so much that I haven't seen at all, if you see what I mean.
I have certainly heard the odd person say that when The Mind Robber came out on DVD, all of a sudden you could see that part one was set in a studio.
Oh, the ground
rather than a sort of a void. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes
it's a bit like the back cloths for Aztecs as well, isn't it? You can sort of see the folds and things.
Yeah.
But then again, didn't they do a certain amount of cleaning that out, which people objected to as well? I vaguely remember, and again, this may be me remembering something wrong, but didn't somebody sue the BBC because on one of the DVD releases they cut the fade to black down to a couple of seconds when it was 12 seconds, and they said they were supposed to be complete and uncut, and how dare they? Did that not happen?
Well, I don't think they actually sued them, but there was a complaint to like sort of consumer standards because it said complete and unedited. And on VHS...
Well, we can rely on the common sense of people.
The Edge of Destruction, yeah.
Bit of politics, sorry.
But Paul, I'd just like to sort of remind people of when you got Dark Shadows, because Lisa and Andy did you VHS recordings, and I think Lisa always said she did it on long play to get as much on the tape.
They might have both done, just because that was the only way, to cope with so many. In fact, it was on 2 episodes a day, I think, and and even if I saw them once a month, I'd have to give them a big pack of tapes, and with 1,200 episodes, I think.
But I'm guessing you were just glad to see them. You weren't really that worried about picture quality at that point. But is it more of a concern for you
really,
now?
But I mean, now I have the DVDs and access on Amazon Prime as well. It's more having the time to actually go. It'd be nice to be able to go back and watch them all, but I've always got so many other things on. I might spend an evening watching a few episodes in a row, and.
But do you spot more mistakes? With better quality pictures, do you spot more people in the background that shouldn't be there?
Again, I don't really. I mean, the copies that were videoed for me weren't so. But I mean, it hasn't improved that much by going on to DVD compared to or certainly not that I've noticed. So no, not really. It's quite the picture's quite muddy in Dark Shadows across the board, particularly in the colour ones, I think. And it can change from episode to episode because, they do have so many episodes, but I think some of them come from different sources. So you can get a bad episode, or even at one period, even in the colour, they don't have the colour episodes of all of the colour episode. If you know what I mean, so they only have black and white copies of some of the colour episodes in the early days of their colour.
There's an awful lot of colour. Is it the tubes in the cameras where they used to get a lot of smearing in the early 70s, wasn't there? So, and again with the NTSC conversion, that really sometimes our idea of what non-film American shows look like is based on some very ghastly images. Do you think something like Year of the Sex Olympics actually probably looks better in black and white, really, than it probably did in colour. I was also, when you were saying about people in the background, I was just remembering, is it Earthshot?
Oh, yeah.
Spotted the stick person.
That's right. The telly was high up on Peter Davison's telly, and he spotted it and phoned JNT and sort of said, "Do you realise you've got the continuity gals banging shot?" Or the arm of the microphone in City of Death Part 3, where Tancredi is interrogating the Doctor. Apparently, I didn't spotted it until I read an interview with Douglas Adams, but you can actually see the whole arm and the boom.
Although they must have nothing to do with picture quality, but when I was watching, I think it was season 2 of Dynasty, the amount of boom mics in that season was appalling, more than in the whole 26-year history of the original Doctor Who.
I think it's interesting though, because we were watching something for our other podcast, and I noticed a boom shot come in, and I do think it's sometimes the fact that you now see the full screen of the shot, and back in the day there were cowls around the screens, and the whole screen, the whole image wasn't actually on screen, so it's actually easy to be critical now. Whereas it probably, the actual image you were supposed to see was about 90% of that. I know when we were doing TV graphics when I was training, there was a border area that you had to say don't put anything text wise beyond this rectangle, although the screen was this rectangle, if you see what I mean. You had to allow margins.
But Martin, you said about black and white, and I think all of us can remember things like Laurel and Hardy films being on BBC Two at sort of 6 o'clock. But by 1993 it was highly unusual for Planet of the Daleks Part 3 to be something on BBC One
is that
in
actually
black
the
and
last
white.
time a black and white?
I'm not sure. But it might
right.
be. And when do you think sort of channel controllers got wary of black and white? Is it the sort of mid 80s? Or not?
Well, didn't Channel 4 did show some black and white Avengers, didn't it?
Yes, yeah.
And I don't think they showed Danger Man. So and I think generally now they tend to just go for the colour Saint and the colour Avengers. I think the colour Avengers was, they would put a few black and white on, but apparently, and again this is probably completely wrong, but the audience figures used to drop off a cliff when something was black and white.
But Channel 4 also showed the early seasons of Voyage and Lost in Space, the season of that's in black and white. But then again, that was very much Sunday morning TV. It wasn't prime time by any means.
That's true. Yes, I do remember. I was going to think. I do remember seeing the black and white on the bottom of the sea. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean the black and white Dad's Army still get shown occasionally when they go on their big loop round Dad's Army. But Paul, you've got Bewitched, haven't you? And is it true they've colorised the first season or so of Bewitched?
I think it's still available in different form. I think you can when you're buying it, you can choose which version you buy. So I don't know what my box set. Probably, I think my box set is all colour. I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 seasons that are in black and white, but yeah, I mean it almost seems to have been. They made a decision on the box set that it was going to sell better if it's all in colour, I suppose.
I think the thing that always surprises me is stuff that was shot on film cameras, and quite a lot of American sitcoms were, is how incredibly crisp the image looks when you compare it to the smeary black and white videotape of the same sort of vintage. So if you look at something like the first film series of the Avengers with Diana Rigg, and you see the DVD, they are glorious. They are gloriously crisp, beautiful, and then you compare them with the Honor Blackman series, and it's how people can say they can't spot the difference between videotape and film is beyond me. It really is.
Yeah, I think that's the trouble for a little bit for me, is that I saw those that first Diana Rigg season, and I liked that sort of black, film black and white. It was, and then a lot of other black and white it just doesn't stand up to that. So yeah, if everything was film black and white, I would have less problem with black and white.
I mean, the script will out, won't it? I mean, ultimately, I personally believe that the black and white public eye are some of the best of that era, and the black and white Callan are some of the best television of that time, and they still hold up. Well, I think that's because the scripts are so good and the performances are so good. But actually, when something's maybe not quite overall as brilliant, you do start to sort of think, oh, God, you know. And of course, there's a difference there. I mean, we were going to talk about this anyway, between multi-camera and single camera. And there's something beautiful about multi-camera in the sense that you get a whole performance. It's a bit like being in the theatre. But I mean, I've actually been quite enjoying recently some of the NT Live things that have been on, that they've been showing, the actual live theatre. Now, some people say, "Oh, I can't stand theatre because it's so static," but actually, the way they cut it between the actors, so it's more film-like anyway. And I just think sometimes that it holds up by having that complete performance. I've been watching a few Crown Courts of late. In Crown Court, you just get an actor on 2 or 3 cameras being brilliant. Sorry,
but Nick,
I left you stunned there, didn't I?
But Nick, are there shows that you sort of remember from the 70s where you think you're sort of glad that still survives in colour? Because there are things like Escape into Night, I don't know if you're familiar with that, or Time Slip, where all that survives is the black and white ones. And I'm just trying to imagine if a couple of years later that had happened.
Well,
with things like
as I say,
the Stones or the Changes.
I think the answer would have to be yes. I'm very glad it survives in colour, because I suppose I like black and white, but I think because of the era I come from, you know, more of a sort of 70s colour-y era. If it's meant to be in colour, then the only thing is, I would have seen Children of the Stones in black and white twice before finally seeing it again on video. So I don't know if it's only I think the only thing you do notice with colour that might sort of give the game away a bit is the old night for day, or is it day for night shooting that they do on Children of the Stones. The only thing technically that seems to let it down. But no, I'm very glad that it all survived. I haven't seen Escape into the Night. I've seen all of Time Slip, and it's one of those I keep meaning to get, but it's been on my list of I'll get round to that, you know. But it's nice to see the colour ones of those, I must admit. But yeah, I'm definitely glad that anything survives, to be honest. At the bottom line, it's just a pleasure to see it again.
I'm just wondering if, like, a couple of seasons of the Tomorrow People only existed in black and white. I'm just trying to imagine that. I mean, yes, I could watch them and turn the colour down on my telly, but yeah, it's only a couple of years on from 81s, and nothing exists of that at all of the first 2 seasons.
Well, yeah, I mean, so put like that. I mean, obviously, again, until 78, I wouldn't have seen the Tomorrow People in colour. So I would have accepted a black and white Tomorrow People, I think. In fact, I think my first copy of Vanishing Earth was in black and white. So it would look, especially with that first set on.
I think we'd assume, wouldn't we, generally, that most of the stuff. I mean, when did black and white actually, get overtaken by colour in terms of in number of sets in the country? Because a lot of television was made for both, wasn't it? So, I mean, I think that there was our memories of that era. I mean, I would have seen a lot of these stuff in black and white anyway. It would never have crossed my mind as a viewer that they might be in colour, to be honest. You just took what you saw. So, I mean, something like Catweasel to me was a black and white programme. Something like say, The Tomorrow People was probably a black and white programme. It's only, say, Children of the Stones was probably black and white, It's only later. I remember a great series called The Owl Service, which is sinister as hell, but probably in my head it's still black and white.
I do wonder, and I don't have an answer to this, but I do wonder if we started buying more Aussie TV once they went to colour, because they were later in going over. I'm not aware of ever seeing any Aussie shows in black and white.
What? Not even Skippy?
Well, I never saw that, so that might have got. Was that in black and white? That might have got over.
We had lots of. There was lots of in the mornings in the 70s. There were an awful lot of Australian, like Whirlybirds. I know where Whirlybirds was American actually, but there was a lot of Australian telly turned up in our morning schedule, then we lapped it up. It was all brilliant.
Yeah, because they didn't go over to colour till 75.
So would the Sullivans have been black and white?
No, I think the Sullivans falls within that, as does I think Young Doctors does as well, which is must be one of the first. There were quite a few other Aussie soaps. Number 96, which is a fascinating one, and The Box, which is all about working on a TV station. A lot of that's black and white. What exists, and but so I've had to trace that down by sort of Australian video releases. But I think most of the stuff of the soap operas we got over here were after the colour changeover.
You imagine, though, I mean, Australia was such a vast country to actually technically get a signal across all that space, and then have to convert it to. It must have taken you a while to do, and it's amazing from that point of view. Do you think that when they finally went to full colour broadcasting across Australia, did they create a new program especially to use the colour? I mean, there's a lot of stuff said about Star Trek is one of the reasons that the shirt colours is because everybody was buying colour sets, But I just imagine there's a show in Australia that started to launch colour.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And although digging into my mind, I do get the feeling that the different states, it was a bit like the ITV, like TVS and Central and all those sorts of things. So different states possibly were showing shows at different rates. I'm pretty sure I remember reading about Prisoner that it finished in different states at different times, almost like it did over here, sort of thing.
Yeah, we were selling programs to Australia for decades, weren't we? I mean, and all our black and white stuff was going to Australia. I mean, it must really annoy people now that the first 10 years of Coronation Street is black and white, because they could bundle it all up. Because doesn't all of Coronation Street exist? Am I right?
Except for about 12 episodes. I think.
Really? Okay. Right. Okay.
There was I have looked at that quite recently. There's about a week or two in about 68 or something like that.
Right. That they lost for no apparent reason because they were throwing all the Z cars away by accident.
I can't remember if there was a reason, but yeah, I know it's very few considering how many episodes there were.
Yeah, that is. But of course, that would have all been. I mean, all those sort of shows, the same way Doctor Who was. It was all sort of carted over for Australian broadcasting. And if Australia was still using black and white, I mean, this is why people like Tony Hancock were so massive in Australia. Because they were buying our telly.
There must be a reason other than quality that so much Coronation Street exists, and yet so little early Crossroads exists. I mean, some early Crossroads exists, but it must be just something to do with the different retention policies.
I've got a trivia question for you,
Go,
Martin.
please.
You know your Charlie Brown. don't you?
Well, sort of. Go on.
What colour is Charlie Brown's top?
Yellow.
Yellow and black.
Yellow and black. Yes,
Isn't
I
it?
would say.
Yeah. When did people first find out that?
I imagine it's the Charlie Brown Christmas, or it's whatever it's called. It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, or when they made them. I don't actually know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting though that because obviously in newspaper circles, there were a lot of American papers had the insert, the comics insert, certainly the weekend papers. So it could well be that it's a lot earlier than that. In fact, what we should do is ask the Schultz Museum. I will ask them on Twitter when I get round to it, because it is actually quite interesting. I would say it was probably for the TV film versions that were made. I mean, Charlie Brown certainly, Peanuts is certainly very much a very two-dimensional world, and yet they have managed to quite successfully make three-dimensional films of it. So but I would imagine that because I mean that you still get sort of dot colour cartoons. It's the same with the comic books. And I imagine it was probably quite early on because in the same way that you get Grey Hulk in Marvel comics, don't you? But the early comic books, the ones that were reprinted in colour, I think it's possibly someone arbitrarily decided it was yellow, and it's been yellow ever since.
I've just thought of something as well. Here's my admission for this episode. When the Troughton Years came out on video, I was quite excited at getting the Space Pirates Part 2. Not because it had Gordon Gostelow in it, because it looks really good. because it exists on a 35mm print. So it's a very, very good picture. And one day, it was a nice day, and I thought, I know, I'll take my black and white telly outside in the video player and watch them outside on a sun lounger. so I trailed leads, electric leads out of the window.
Not on a lilo in the swimming pool, I hope.
Well, no, this is the thing. And I sat down and started to watch the Space Pirates Part 2 on video on our black and white telly, and then it started to rain.
Oh dear!
So
bang!
You're lucky I'm still here.
Oh yeah.
Death by space pirates.
Yeah. So that
Darwin
was the
Award.
last thing I ever saw. Yeah.
Golly.
I hope it is the last thing I ever see. I like Space Pirates.
I know you do. I don't dislike it.
Oh dear!
I'd certainly
Yes,
be glad of some more.
you just wanted a luxury pool Space Pirates.
I'd be glad of. Yeah, but yeah. Well, you see these adverts with little tellies being floated out on Lilo.
Yeah.
And I'm just imagining it, as you said, Martin, our dirty great 20-inch black and white. Playing the Space Pirates going past.
Damn rubbishy newfangled old tellies.
But I'm trying to think when we got rid of our black and white telly. And it might have been just when we moved house in 1998. What about you? Did you have a spare black and white knocking around for years?
Sorry, when I had my flat broken into and they took my colour telly, I did still have a black and white one. So that would have been around about certainly mid-90s. So yeah, I did finally take it to the tip a few years later. But,
So they didn't want to steal your black and white one then?
I don't think they noticed it, quite frankly.
Our 90 from 75 to 78 DER rental went back to DER obviously in 78 when we got a colour. However, the Echo set, which presumably we owned because we clung onto it long after we actually used it. So, but that was in the garage for years, which didn't get pulled down until 1991. So the Echo set was in there doing absolutely diddly squat for over 10 years, which probably wasn't a very safe thing to do. But no, actually thinking about it, no, I've got a picture of it being carted away by some charity shop people. So you never know, it could be out there somewhere, not doing very much. And probably Ali had a solid state telly from the same era, and we kept that on until since we moved here. So we finally gave that away about 2013 or 14, and that was still had the dot. If you had it on for long enough, it was a black and white. If you still had it on for long enough, the picture still went into a dot. And it rolled. I think it was still with us when the analog signal was switched off. So in actual fact, the only thing it picked up in the last years of its life was French radio. So yeah, but that was still with us for a while.
Très bien. There is a wonderful thing though, isn't there, about visions of the future dating so quickly, because how many of the sets of space programs still have round-fronted sort of 4x3 television sets, you know? Yeah. I mean, if you look even at the Star Trek films, you know,
or the whirling tape pools. Go back to Colony in Space.
Oh yes, indeed.
Sort of the tape spools still going strong.
And the cassette.
Yes.
I mean, was it Servalan has all? I mean, it's like you're the supreme commander of the universe or whatever, and you've got a black and white telly.
Well, the Time Lords have got a black and white telly in the Three Doctors, haven't they?
You see, they know class when they see it.
Omega had sucked the colour out of all their tellies, so they had to switch to the black and white set. You know, they're draining the life out of them.
Yeah, that's what black holes do. They suck all the light.
Absolutely.
They take the red, yellow, and green first.
The Time Lords are clearly only interested in Australian TV, which times in black and white. That licks it all up.
But that's too terrible to contemplate. Someone must go and fish the doctor.
But Nick, I remember the layout of your bedroom, if you'll pardon the expression. But what was the little square telly you had in your bedroom, the little colour thing?
Oh yes, that was my Matsu. That was my first baby. Because of course, coming from a culture that was still going strong in the 80s of rental, and more rental. I finally decided that having sort of said, we rented a video for a while, and I said, well, this is silly. Linda King, my old friend who had a video long before the rest of us, bought her own, and has always bought her own. And I could afford it by '89, so I bought that. And I thought, oh, why don't I get my own telly whilst I'm at it? Here we are, years with slave to rental. And so that was my first telly. I bought it in February 90. I think the first thing I saw on it was a combination of Seek, Locate, Destroy and Nelson Mandela being released. Interesting combination. But that was the one. All those halcyon days of you and Paul and the gang coming over on a Sunday afternoon, and we all did recording or RPS or just watched loads of stuff, different stuff. And that was the telly you remember, and I had it. It survived until '99 when it was I think the signal was pretty well wobblified, and so I
must be preserved on many episodes of Sutton Park as well.
Many.
We need a freeze frame.
And also the behind.
We need a screen grab. We want
the
one
making
now.
of RPS has got. That in quite close up, because we're sort of rushing around doing articles and recording things and generally turning the air blue when things have gone wrong and everything. So there's some big close-ups in there. But, Paul's right. Yeah, it's in loads of episodes of SP. So that my Matsui.
And this was how you enticed people into your bedroom.
Yes.
Fair enough. No. It's kind of interesting from that point of view. Is when did television rental stop and get replaced? When did they become cheap enough that nobody decided they wanted to rent them anymore? What era would that would that have been? Sort of mid-80s again, or earlier than that?
Well, I'm trying to think, because I certainly rented my video recorder.
Certainly we gave up. Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Oh, sorry. I was the first one in our house to actually buy a telly, and I think by a couple of years later, my parents had and the rental side of it, things were pretty dead in the water by then. So I would say late 80s, early 90s, things started really moving to. Although rental was still going strong in the 90s, because I rented loads of cameras out. So it was still thriving. I don't know. I don't know when it really started to hit the rocks.
I was just intrigued because again, we went from there being one big telly in the house and fighting over what you could actually see, to everybody having one in every room.
Yes.
And nowadays everybody has a TV set in their pocket. But, I wonder where that cultural change actually happened, if you see what I mean. And whether that actually is one of the things.
It certainly turned on its head my parents had tellies coming out of their ears by the time they died. We had to. Do you want another telly? Do you want another telly? There's a telly in that room. There's a telly in that room. I mean, we've only got the one actual telly per se, because of course we've got screens and everything like that. So, it certainly turned right round by the noughties.
It's just it's that thing, isn't it? Sort of suddenly something becomes cheap enough. It's like a DVD player was a luxury item, and then it became something you could get for 20 quid in Asda.
Yes.
So your current big telly, when did you get it, and where did you get it from? I'm just interested. What the one we have now? Yeah, your current big telly. Oh, we got a flat one. I think we got it from Comet or Curry's. Must be 5 or 6 years old. We haven't replaced in quite a long time. And what sort is it? Panasonic. Because ours is a Panasonic too. We tend to have a bit of brand loyalty with that. I don't particularly know why, but again, this friend of mine, as I told you years ago, who used to get Star Trek when it was being transmitted in America, Next Generation. He would get tapes sent over once a month with about 10 episodes on, and they had the switch on for the NTSC conversion, which is why he bought Panasonic. And he was always terribly excited because he had picture-in-picture and things like that, and this was all stuff, I was still watching my Relic back at my flat, and this was all. So when I could afford to buy a proper TV, Panasonic was the way I went, and it sounds now like we're actually being sponsored to say this. Oh, if only. True enough. But send free televisions to the following address. Yeah. But we went into Wimborne to choose ours.
Oh, right.
To actually see it in the shop. And I took along the DVD of Ambassadors of Death to test it. Because
No shame.
No shame, because part one's in really good quality.
Right.
And I thought that would be a good test of it. But I wanted to see something in less good quality as well, like one of the other episodes. And so we were sitting there playing the Ambassadors of Death DVD at random points to see what it looked like on the telly.
Wow. That is amazing. That is chutzpah. I just go, I'll have that one, please.
But Nick
and the thing about when you go in a shop is there's always some dreadful daytime TV show on.
Yeah.
On about 400 screens.
Well, you see, that's no test of a telly, is it?
Well, I just say I know I won't be watching.
But Nick and Paul, what about your current big telly? What's the history of those?
Current big telly was a Goodman's that bought I think in Bournemouth in 2010, and it's a flat screen. It was a quick replacement for the previous telly was given to us by a very bulky thing with tubes, which was given to us by my brother-in-law in 2002 when we first moved in together. So it lasted 8 years before going. And it's unfortunately, infuriatingly, our current I'm not a big fan of big tellies. I wouldn't be dissatisfied with something a bit smaller than even what we've got. But I think, infuriatingly, the analog signal was switched off about a couple of years after we got it. So we're still, because we watch so many DVDs. Every time we want to watch actually something in real time, we have to retune the wretched thing every single time. So there is talk of us getting something else. I think there was something on offer that somebody had. I think it might be my brother-in-law yet again, but yeah. So we've only had the apart from the little solid state one that would belong to Ali's granddad. We've only had the two tellies. I had an Orion one between my Matsui and the other one, but the signal was never brilliant on it, and it lasted about four homes without doing nothing, which I gave it away in the end. But yeah, Goodman's flat screen doodah. Yeah, I mean it works for me.
And Paul, what have you got?
We've got a Sony, but I'm not very good with the history because I think the last couple, or maybe more, it's been one of my flatmates who's bought it rather than me. So I'm not quite sure where we got it from. Even maybe Amazon, maybe Tesco. But we've got a flat screen. I think it's only about 3 or 4 years old. I might be wrong, but it's definitely a Sony. I can see it written on it as I sit here.
How are you all about the what do you call it? Not format. What's the screen? What's the word? Aspect ratio. I'm quite happy to watch. Let it spread and fill the width of the widescreen and not be watched in a sort of not pillar box but whatever slot in the middle. I'm quite happy to have my pictures spread, and some people think this is a crime against television for me to watch things that way. And I just wondered whether you had a sort of preference. Any of them?
I certainly wouldn't put anyone down who wanted to do that. Fair to play to them. I think it's very much a matter of taste rather than kind of. Yeah, me personally, I like to have the border. I like a little bit more of a condensed picture. But yeah, I mean, as I say, horses for courses.
Well, certainly, what actually does annoy me more is when you get clip shows and they actually filmise stuff from the 70s, which really does make it look dreadful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's more annoying to me than. But if I can make it 4:3 when it should be, then we tend to press the button. Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Paul.
I don't have that much preference, but I was certainly interested by what you were saying about the margin on TV being diff. That would definitely. It might explain my boom mic problem on Dynasty.
Mine defaults to just filling the entire screen.
Yeah.
But actually, the Blu-rays don't. So when I watch a Blu-ray, it has the margins, but when I watch a DVD, it spreads it to the full width. And it always throws me a bit, because if I put the DVD in on the computer automatically puts it to 4:3, and sometimes I forget. I'm thinking, why is it doing that? Because I just get so used to I plonk the disc in and I watch the thing. I'm not really fussed about whether the edges are stretched out or anything. So I suppose it's because if your thing is more the script and the performance, maybe it doesn't bother you. I don't know. It's just an odd one. I had a friend years ago who really, really, really couldn't go and see films in the cinema because he said he could see the flicker of the 24 frames a second. And is it not true that all films, when they're shown on television, run slightly shorter than they do in the cinema because of that 24 to 25 frame thing? Or am I making that up as well?
No, it sounds good.
I'm not sure. I think we need the restoration team at this point.
Yeah.
So we'll just phone Steve Roberts and ask.
We're the Sutton Park restoration team. That's not quite the same.
I just mean that all films run sort of slightly faster because they're being played at 25 frames on a 24 frame system. Old films especially.
I know
all old films run slightly shorter on television.
I know Star Trek, that the VHS releases, everybody spoke in a slightly higher pitch. On the
Hello, Mr. Spock! Hello, how you doing? I'm alright, thank you very much. That sort of thing.
Yeah, so Patrick Stewart was like sort of a couple of semitones up or something.
Make it so!
And if you saw the originals, you'd
get that in
be
the edit.
surprised. Yeah. but there you are. There's a quick sort of wander through formats. But Martin, I think we should round off by saying,
should we?
You're doing the daily cartoon.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to.
And we've been stretched to 16:9, haven't we?
You have, or more even,
because of social distancing.
Yes.
And have you found that going back to 4:3 has been a bit of a problem to get all the words in now?
Well, most of the originals were in 1x1, if you remember.
Yeah.
Or 4x4, if you prefer. They were square, and they were square because it works very well on Instagram. I'm not sure. I sort of thought about going back, and then I thought, well, I think I think the world at the moment needs to be reminded of the distancing. So I actually think it's just a very good metaphor, a very visual metaphor. The problem is I keep running out of... you keep having less in stock than I hope you have. So I keep running out of ideas, hence my panic on Monday morning when somebody thought, that's the last one. So I've been busily trying to fill, and of course that's why they're not very funny at the moment, because I keep running out of jokes. So if I can think of something to say, I'll say it. But no, the fascinating thing was when we first did the I think it's actually a 2:1 full width. I think that's how I did it in the end. But I think the interesting thing was we could suddenly get more words in, and I thought, well, Andy will like that. Yes, he's much more verbose these days. So actually, I think you'll be sort of thinking, oh, these have been selling people short now. Yeah. But again, it's a wonderful metaphor for what we do, and it's a wonderful metaphor for what we're talking about today. So
yeah, I just thought it appropriate to talk about formats today.
Oh yes.
So
again, interestingly enough, when they appear on my phone, they get cropped. The black edges left and right actually get cropped. It doesn't seem to be quite able to cope with that full widescreen experience when you do a photograph or when you upload a photograph. And again, of course, but the beauty of the way I've done them is that it makes 2 frames in Instagram, so that works well. But I think when we go back to it, we may go back to the sort of halfway house that used to be our special ones when Warren was in place. But of course,
Nick's mention of the little white dot when you turn the telly off, we should point out you have done 1 frame which is just black with a little white dot in the middle, haven't you?
Yeah. That's if ever I get hit by a bus. Yes. That's
so
the end
if
of
the
it.
cartoons ever do come to an end, we already have the frame, don't we?
They nearly did. They nearly came to an end this week. But number 101 was a real struggle. I tell you.
Please remember to turn off your Round the Archives cartoon.
I don't know. Do you think anybody will miss them though? Really? I mean, I never know. They don't seem to get that much sort of feedback. But do you think when they stop, will you suddenly get people going, "Where's your thing?" Because it's been 600 odd days now, hasn't it?
I know, it's frightening, isn't it?
I've recorded a a last episode of the Shy Life podcast to be used in emergencies. But if I but if and it's a full episode. It's not edited yet, but it's recorded, and it has a proper end to the fiction side of it. Although if it doesn't go out, it'll probably get used as an April Fool's episode, and I'll record another, an updated last episode.
It is a thing, though, isn't it? Because these things happen in the world, and you always think, you sometimes feel that it's like the unfinished books of Dickens, or someone writes 6 books in a 7-book series and then gets hit by a bus. You always feel that you need to have something in the bank just in case.
Well, I'm very aware that I never did a proper last episode of Sutton Park. So with the podcast, Although of course Sutton Park keeps coming back in the podcast. So, but yeah, I kind of.
You'll do what's it called, trials and tribulations with it at some point, where you start to meet yourselves, and the technology will be available.
Well, there's a thought. Well, on that note, we'll say thank you very much for joining us today. So, thank you, Martin.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all again soon.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.